Welcome to the EU news on September 26th in 2021. And today we start in Luxembourg. The EU Commission has decided to refer Luxembourg to the Court of Justice of the European Union for failing to notify the national measures necessary to implement EU rules on the acquisition and possession of firearms. The Commission has also asked the Court of Justice to impose financial sanctions on the country. The Firearms Directive defines common minimum standards for the acquisition and possession of civilian firearms, for example, hunting or sporting firearms, and the trade in such weapons. The rules allow the lawful use and movement of firearms, but prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands, thus helping to break down criminal business models and fight organized crime. The lawsuit concerns a number of provisions that were introduced with the 2017 revision of the directive and which member states had to implement by September 14th in 2018. In particular, this includes new regulations for arms dealers and brokers, changes in labeling regulations and stricter regulations for the most dangerous firearms. Furthermore, this includes an update of the European Firearms Pass, regulations for certain alarm and signal weapons, as well as salute weapons and acoustic weapons that could easily be converted into lethal firearms, and new regulations for deactivated firearms. The Commission started these infringement proceedings against Luxembourg by sending a letter of formal notice in November 2018 and issued a reasoned opinion in July 2019. So far, Luxembourg has not notified the Commission of the full transposition of the directive into national law. As Luxembourg has not enacted all the necessary legal and administrative provisions to comply with the Firearms Directive, or at least not notified of these to the Commission, the country has breached its obligations under Article 26 of the directive. If a member state fails to transpose a directive adopted by the European Parliament and the Council into national law within the deadline, the Commission can, in accordance with Article 260 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, ask the Court of Justice of the European Union to impose financial sanctions. When determining their amount, the following factors are taken into account. I think it's quite interesting to hear that for once. The gravity of the violation, the duration of the violation, and a so-called factor N, which differs depending on the member state and is calculated according to the respective gross domestic product in million euros, and the number of seats in the European Parliament of the member state concerned. The sanctions proposed by the Commission in this case consist of a lump sum to penalize the infringement itself, and a daily penalty to penalize the continuation of the infringement for the period following the judgment of the Court of Justice. And now, let's go to Rome in Italy. Of all things, Environment Minister Cingolani brought the idea into play. With reactors of the fourth generation, Italy would not be absurd for a return to nuclear energy. The right league jumps up enthusiastically, immediately, of course. The discussion was initiated by none other than Italy's environment minister. In a video conference on Italy's strategy against climate change, Roberto Cingolani suddenly opened a door for nuclear power. The physicist has quite an interesting official title, Minister for Ecological Reconstruction, and he did not want to rule out the possibility of nuclear energy returning to Italy in the form of so-called fourth-generation nuclear reactors. In fourth-generation reactors, a core meltdown, the greatest possible nuclear accident, is physically impossible. He said, if at any given moment it turns out that these reactors are producing very little radioactive waste, that safety is high and the cost per megawatt is low, then it's crazy not to consider this technology. Cingolani's comment that the technology has not yet been adequately researched and that no decision is currently pending was of little use. Italy has since been discussing whether nuclear power plants can also be part of the strategy in the fight against climate change. Support for the advance of the non-party Cingolani, who is assigned to the left liberal camp, comes from the right-wing Lega, among others. In view of the sharp rise in electricity prices, says party leader Matteo Salvini, Italy can no longer remain the only G8 country without nuclear power plants. The Sweden of Greta has 8 nuclear power plants. An Italian energy company is building 4 in Slovenia, and Italian engineers are working on the latest power plants in the world that mean zero risk and zero air pollution, he said. It cannot be that we are the only ones here in Italy who are not doing anything. He forgot Germany, who are turning down all of them. Even if Salvini is not too careful with the figures, because Sweden currently has not 8 but 6 nuclear power plants on the grid, the debate about nuclear energy is particularly explosive in Rome. In 1987, Italy became the first European country to withdraw from the industrial use of nuclear power in a referendum. The majority of Italians rejected a return to nuclear power in another referendum in 2011. Andrea Minutolo, scientific director of the environmental organization Lega Ambiente, which initiated both referendums against atomic energy in Italy, shakes his head at the current debate. He says, talking about nuclear energy in Italy these days is a waste of time. The decision of the people is clear and it has been straightforward. The environmental activist says that the fact that the 4th generation of nuclear power plants is being sold as cheaper and safer by its proponents does not change that, because the main problem of nuclear energy remains. This 4th generation, about which is so much talked, it supposedly provides such clean energy, and it still has reactors that produce radioactive waste. And still nobody knows how to deal with the garbage. Experts also point out that in Italy, which is highly prone to earthquakes, the use of nuclear energy is particularly risky. But the debate about a return to nuclear power has started now. The Lombardy region, with its Lega-dominated leadership, has already expressed interests in becoming a location for 4th generation nuclear reactors. Representatives of the Five Star Movement protested in the regional parliament in Milan with gas masks and posters. For the Populist Party co-ruling in Rome, the current debate is particularly painful. The Five Stars made their entry into the Draghi government dependent on a ministry is set up for the ecological conversion, exactly the ministry from which the impetus has now come to consider a return of atomic energy in Italy. Leaving it was wrong in Germany, by the way, but we can't go back either. We are out. But now let's go to Germany, to Fulda. Despite ongoing criticism from victims of abuse, the Catholic German Bishops' Conference is sticking to its regulation on the payment of compensation for pain and suffering. The bishops wanted to orientate themselves further on the pain and suffering payments of the state courts, said the chairman Georg Betzing at the end of the autumn plenary meeting in Fulda. There are currently around 1,000 open cases in the system of recognition benefits. On the fringes of the Bishops' Conference, there were again protests against the compensation practice in Germany, which provides a maximum of 50,000 euros in compensation for pain and suffering for victims of abuse. To begin with, several victims' initiatives accused the Catholic Church of unspeakable treatment of those affected by sexual abuse in church institutions. The payment framework for the recognition payments of up to 50,000 euros specified by the bishops is ridiculously low, said representatives of the Alliance for Those Affected and the Giordano Bruno Foundation. The specific decisions of the Independent Commission for Recognition Services far exceed our worst fears, it said. The sexual abuse scandal was the focus of the autumn plenary meetings. Steps forward were taken again, said Betzing. For example, a standard personnel file order has been passed that will come into force on January 1st of next year, as well as a model order that creates the legal framework for processing commissions to inspect files. These are very important promises that we made in 2018 and are now keeping, said Betzing. 2018 to now, okay. A fundamental change in the system of recognition services, which has been criticized in particular by victim initiatives, is not planned, said the DBK chairman. However, there are considerations as to how readjustments can be made even after the feedback has been received that the victims are sometimes re-traumatized within the framework of the system of recognition payments. This darkest chapter must be given priority, and he too wants to face this challenge, said Betzing. It has also become clear that the current structure of the processing, which the Trier Bishop Stefan Ackermann, as the representative of the German Bishops' Conference, is no longer sufficient and needs to be put on a broader basis, says Betzing. Therefore, on Ackermann's suggestion, the bishops had decided to develop a concept for the further development of the area of responsibility, because it's clear, they say, the subject of abuse does not let us go. It will not let go of us for a long time. As the next step, a discussion between representatives of the affected advisory councils, the Independent Commission for Recognition Services, the Conference of the Superiors, and the German Bishops' Conference is planned for the middle of October. The points of criticism of the system should be discussed again and possible measures discussed. And now let's go to Ankara in Turkey. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has lamented bad relations with the US government under President Joe Biden. He said, "I can't say that we have a good start with Mr. Biden." And Erdogan said this on Thursday in New York, according to the state news agency Anadolu. With Barack Obama, George W. Bush and Donald Trump, however, he said he worked well together. The current development of relations between the two NATO countries does not bode well, Erdogan continued. And he said, "In my almost 19-year leadership career as Prime Minister and President, the point we have reached with America is unfortunately not a good one." The foreign ministers of both countries met at the UN General Assembly, but not the presidents. Erdogan criticized the United States for its actions in Afghanistan. US weapons are now in the hands of the Taliban, he says. The US would have to pay a price for this. The Turkish president also reiterated that his country was not ready to accept refugees from Afghanistan. Turkey would not open its doors. The country was not an open air corridor. Turkey and the USA are at odds with each other on many issues. The US under Biden's predecessor Donald Trump had imposed sanctions against Turkey because of the purchase of the Russian S-400 missile defense system. For us, the S-400 issue is closed. It's also not possible for us to back down, Erdogan said now. At the end of August, after the Taliban took Kabul, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken described Turkey on Twitter as an important partner in the region. But even before his election, Biden had been very critical of Erdogan. Rightfully, I must say. Biden said several times in an interview with the New York Times that he was very concerned about Erdogan's policy. He called the Turkish president an autocrat and called for the support of the Turkish opposition to defeat Erdogan. The Kurds in particular have to be supported, Biden said at that time. And he used the formulation that Erdogan now also used. The Turkish president, so Biden at the time, had to pay a price. And now let's go to Brussels in Belgium. The European Commission launched a public consultation on Thursday on EU air quality rules. The revision of the current rules is an important prerequisite for the European Green Deal. The aim is to bring EU air quality standards closer to the new recommendations of the World Health Organization. In addition, the provisions for air quality monitoring, modeling and plans to support local authorities with air pollution control are to be strengthened. The consultation runs until December 16th. EU Environment Commissioner Virginijus Sinkevicius emphasized, We have set ourselves the goal of creating a pollution-free environment, and we want the citizens of the EU to breathe clean air. To achieve this, we need to address certain pollutants that are of concern. And as the WHO guidelines have just revised, we need to be even stricter on those pollutants in December. Every year, 400,000 people die prematurely in the EU as a result of air pollution. The health and economic costs of lost working days, healthcare, crop losses, and damage to buildings are estimated at between 330 and 940 billion per year in the EU. The revision of the regulation will help improve air quality and, as announced in the zero pollution target for air, water, and soil, reduce premature deaths by at least 55%. The updated WHO air quality guidelines, an important building block in the Commission's deliberations on the target level, set values that are significantly lower than currently, especially for the air pollutants with the greatest health effects in Europe. By pursuing these benchmarks, countries will both protect health and contain global climate change. A report published this week by the European Environment Agency on the state of air quality in Europe shows that air pollution is still too high in most EU member states. The public consultation launched on Thursday follows the publication of the first impact assessment and an assessment of the legislation in force from 2019. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.